Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, or whenever you happen to be listening to this. Welcome to the Film Realist Podcast, the film and TV podcast from a complete nobody. That is hopefully for somebody. My name is Kyle Naranya. Welcome to episode 156, which is the last MCU movie of 2025. And while I'm sure you would expect I could talk about this all by myself, I'm fortunate to have friends amongst the podcasting community. And he's typically on for only DC related properties, but we live in an era now where you can like both, believe it or not, which is why I am joined by one of my good friends, Dylan Pollack of Movies to Watch Before You Die. Dylan, welcome back.
Why, hello there. But the question is, I'm normally on for DC things. Did I like this Marvel thing? I could like both. Do I?
That's a very good point. So we will be doing a brief non-spoiler review of Fantastic Four First Steps, and then we will jump into spoilers, and then we will play a game called Ranking the Marvel Cinematic Universe in 2025. Time codes will be listed for every segment, so if you want to hop around, you're more than welcome to. And then I will be responding to Question of the Week responses and listener mail. Dylan, let's jump into non-spoilers?
Let's do it.
Are you the protectors of this world?
Yes, we are.
Your planet is now marked for death. Your world will be consumed by the Devourer. There is nothing you can do to stop him.
Dylan, this is an interesting dynamic because on the podcast, normally we've watched shows together. I know for Creature Commandos, and correct me if I'm wrong, you kind of shotgunned them kind of all on the Friday leading up to our review, if I remember correctly.
I sort of did both. I watched them week to week,
Yeah.
but then I knew we were talking about it, and I said I'm going to re-binge all of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I was very fortunate enough to see Fantastic Four at a press screening, and then I went and saw it with friends. And before we get into your non-spoiler thoughts, I wanted to tell you a very funny story. So for our younger listeners, midnight releases were the church of big blockbusters for a very long time. You went Thursday at 12, leading into the official release date. And then around the time of the Avengers, they started pivoting to these Thursdays. Now, they would still market the movie as being a Friday release, but, you know, you would get a little extra money, and Jurassic World's a great indicator. It came out on Wednesday, so it gets extra days for its opening weekend. And so I saw this with a friend of mine, Chris, from the show, and we're sitting there, and about 10 minutes in, there's a lady in the very front row who's taking pictures within the first 10 minutes multiple times, which, of course,
As the
that
movie's
is a
going?
sin as the movie is going, yes.
Well, that's not... you know what? I went to that Superman Prime screening that they had, and I had somebody doing the same thing where they were doing like a Snapchat of the beginning of it, and I was like, what's the point of being a fan and getting here so that you can watch it through your phone?
Yes, it's a very unfortunate thing, and many people commit movie sins, as I've discussed. And the best comment I think I've ever heard, at least in a Marvel movie in quite a while, was, and I'm going to skip the expletives, but somebody said, "For bleeping sake, we've been waiting 24 years for a good Fantastic Four movie. Put away your bleeping phone." To which the rest of the auditorium responded with a raucous cheer, and then we all zoned back in, which was very, very funny. But Dylan, you quite literally, as we start recording, you are 30 minutes out from the movie. So why don't you start off with your non-spoiler thoughts?
Okay, so it's hard not to compare this to the big superhero movie that came out like 2 weeks before it, which is Superman, right? And my feeling with Superman is it's overstuffed, but in a way that made me wish there was more of it.
Mhm.
Fantastic Four feels like it's overstuffed, but in a way that I can notice that things are missing. Now, that's not to say I
Okay.
strongly dislike the movie or anything like that. It's, you know, it's funny because I was on Jordan Blumen's podcast, The Phantom Optimist, and I was talking about Jurassic World
Mhm.
Rebirth, and it's a line I keep coming back to, is I said about that movie, everything about it is great except for the story and the writing. You know what I mean?
Is it?
With Jurassic World Rebirth,
don't have
yes, but with Fantastic Four, my feeling was everything was great, but I feel like I only got like 80% of it at times. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I still think it's really good. I think it doesn't help that there's so much news coverage of every Marvel movie that you know so much going into it. Like the fact that I knew Paul Walter Hauser was in it, John Malkovich was supposed to be in it, and he got cut out of it. You know, that's not spoilers. That's stuff that was news stories beforehand. But you can tell kind of where things are cut, because the first half of this movie almost feels like a montage.
I think that's not necessarily an unfair criticism. I put this out as a short, reel, TikTok, whatever you want to call it, a vertical video, 9:16 aspect ratio on Friday, which was what I was most curious about for audiences going into this. And we've had many discussions outside of the podcast about the gluttony of comic book movies. And what I find really interesting is, and James Gunn's discussed this to connect to Superman, is it's not people are sick of superhero movies. It's people are sick of bad blockbusters
Yeah.
that used to do quite well. And it's funny because, in my opinion, Jurassic World Rebirth is an indicator of something that follows that old strategy, because I think it's a bad movie and it just happens to keep trekking along. People love dinosaurs, which the irony is of the entire Jurassic World franchise. They're like, oh, people are sick of dinosaurs. Well, in the real world, that's obviously not the case, because each of these movies continues to make money. What's so funny to me about Fantastic Four, though, is it is removed, and this will be in my Letterboxd written review, which I've typed out. If you're not following Movies to Watch Before You Die or me on Letterboxd, if you want to just read our reviews, they're posted there. And this movie is safe from the baggage of the main 616 multiverse saga that we've had so far, which I found really interesting, because that was, to me, going to be the ultimate testament to the quality of the movie. And obviously you address the marketing of if it was going to work. And what I find so funny about this is we had a conversation about Thunderbolts, which we will kind of get into at the very end of this episode this week. But what I find really funny is the things I loved about Fantastic Four feel very reminiscent of stuff we loved in Phase 1, because these entry points felt so refreshing at the time. And this is not a spoiler. This is a world separate from the main MCU. So we just get to see those characters. Now, I think something you and I can agree on. We don't hate movies that are longer than 90 minutes, Gab. So I'm not bothered by a 2.5 hour movie. And I agree with you. I think that, to me, is a testament to how much I enjoyed the movie. Is I would have watched a 2.5 hour version of this.
Yeah. Do you know what the runtime was on this?
It's 155,
Yeah.
like an hour and 55 minutes. Yeah.
Which is pretty short for these. You know, it's not that
Mhm.
short in general, I don't think, but that's pretty short for one of these movies. And I think, you know, just to go back to something you said, I loved that this was its own world, because it's not weighed down by any baggage of anything else. This is the Fantastic Four's story and only theirs. In fact, is it said, or, well, that would be a spoiler, so I won't say it.
We'll get into it
Yeah.
later. Yeah, I think one of the main thing we can focus on here, because as is typical with superhero or comic book movies, there's a lot to discuss that was not in the trailers. Even what they did decide to show us, I found was really interesting. The main thing to focus on in a comic book adaptation, and this is a monumental moment. This is the first time we're seeing the entire Fantastic Four in the MCU. Of course, if you are a longtime fan, we saw John Krasinski as I believe it's 838 version of Mr. Fantastic in Multiverse of Madness, but now we're getting all four. That's the selling point of this movie, and this is not a spoiler. We're getting Spider-Man Brand New Day in July, and then we are going to be getting Avengers Doomsday. So we are going to see the Fantastic Four again. What did you think of the Fantastic Four in Fantastic Four First Steps?
All the performances are great. I think, to me, I think maybe the one who's given the most to do is Vanessa Kirby as Sue Storm. I think does a great job. Pedro Pascal does a really good job of making, you know, I feel like the early 2000s Fantastic Four movies just made Reed Richards into like nerd. You know what I mean? Like, it was just like, he says smart things, but he feels more like a human being who is fleshed out in this movie. And I think I would say that about all of them. I wish I could get to know them a little bit better. You know, for again, if you were going to make this movie a little bit longer, I'd have more time where it's just them interacting, maybe a little bit more in the beginning before things are really going down. I really liked the Thing. The look of the Thing was great. The effect was great. I feel like the only one effects wise that I maybe jarred with sometimes was Human Torch, Johnny. Sometimes when he was flame on, I was like, do I like this? And I just think there's only so many ways you can do Guy on Fire. You know what I mean? So I think it's
Mhm.
fine, but I think maybe it just jarred against my brain a little bit.
So what you're saying is you wanted them to actually light Joseph Quinn on fire.
Yeah, go the full distance. You know what I mean? He's making more money
Get
than
the
I do. Come on.
get the gel on him, light him. I mean, we've seen I'm sure you've seen, as we are movie aficionados, that actual human torch lighting lasts maybe 30 seconds and then they immediately have to put people out. My biggest hesitancy, and this is, I don't want the Pedro Pascal fans to get their pitchforks ready. Reed Richards is a very interesting character to play, and it's very funny to me that as millennials, we're living through what feels like the most whiplash critical reception period of all time, which is we are in our mid 30s, grew up with all of the major first iterations of these characters outside of Batman and Superman, specifically with Marvel. That's abundantly clear going through Blade. We've seen two versions of the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, we've seen two versions. And it's so funny to me that there's this constant reminiscence now, movie starring Hugh Jackman, with, ironically, with the 2000s cast. And I'm just going to say this, those movies aren't good. That's not a criticism of that cast, but those characters and the way they were portrayed, or the dialogue and the depth we were allowed to explore with them, was shallow at best. That's not a reflection of the people they cast. But one of the things that I was hesitant specifically with this, I had faith in Vanessa Kirby because she's amazing. I think Joseph Quinn was somebody I was like, yeah, he can do this. And Eben Moss-Bachrach, of course he could do this. We've seen this guy. He's been in a ton of other things. Ironically, he was in Punisher already, but then Andor and The Bear. And this guy's just been adding incredible pieces of filmography over and over. Andor, which is something I reviewed relatively recently, where, of course, most people and pop culture is obsessed with Pedro Pascal. But my hesitancy was, I don't just want, pun intended, daddy Pedro Pascal we've had in other projects. And I was so happy that Pedro's not going to disappear because he's got such a distinct look. But the relationship between Sue and Reed has to work for the rest of this to work. Specifically, as we've seen in the trailers, with them becoming parents and how that affects their relationships with Johnny and Ben, as well as the world as a whole, that Pedro kind of does disappear into this version of Reed. And I like the idea that the back and forth between them, where, and this has been something I'm sure you and I have seen in other properties, which is, oh, the guy's so smart, well, he has to be on the spectrum and therefore doesn't understand people. Where the way that they portray this and the dynamic that Reed has with everybody around him, he's so smart that he's overwhelmed by, and to me, it reminded me a lot of like ADHD brain, which is you can't turn off all of the things you're thinking about. The difference is with Reed, he can actually find all of the solutions. And we get to see how that affects his relationship with Sue. And Vanessa is the standout of the movie. She is absolutely brilliant. I would say it's one of the best performances maybe in the entire MCU, just specifically on what she's given. And you've talked about it, and I think it is a fair criticism in the runtime, because this movie, and we've seen what's been cut from the trailers, these relationships have to work, because this movie, even more so than Thunderbolts, is the backbone of, if this doesn't sell, we're probably not going to get people, or as many people, to sit down for Doomsday, quite literally named Doomsday, Doctor Doom being the villain of the Fantastic Four. So that to me was the most rewarding element, which was, I don't hate the 2000s movies. I'm aware they're not good. Fanforstic is an absolute mess, but there's all kinds of reasons behind that. And to get a version of the Fantastic Four in a parallel world, free from all of our concerns of the other stuff. And the score is something we definitely have to discuss, which is Michael Giacchino's score for Fantastic Four felt perfectly in tone with the characters and felt like a celebration of Marvel's first family. I was just trying to distill, everyone's calling it retrofuturism, which is what the aesthetic is of this world. But Nalina came up with what I think is the best description. If you don't understand what that means, us being DCAU fans, everyone is used to the word Art Deco for what that world looks like, where this Fantastic Four world is very Jetsons-esque, which is it's 60s tech capable of sci-fi things. And we have a captivating villain who his direct connection to them is much more than just I'm bad guy doing bad guy things. He's not just a cloud, which of course everybody, if you're seeing clips from this episode, I have the big Galactus popcorn bucket behind me. So I was blown away by this because I had more faith that this was going to be good than some other comic book movies we've had lately, because more than anything, as I said, this had to work. Because if it doesn't, like, people are showing up for Spider-Man, but that's, I think, a safe assumption going to feel probably fairly disconnected from the momentum of the next two Avengers movies. Do you have anything else to say non-spoilery, or do you want to jump into spoilers?
Just as you're describing, I would agree that I think the relationships work, specifically Johnny and Ben and Sue and Reed, I think work. You know, we don't see as much of the other interaction. Like, we have one really great interaction between Ben and Reed, but I could have gotten more of that, like I said. And I would say with Galactus, I appreciate that he is not a cloud, and I appreciate that they sort of are just like, Galactus looks like Galactus, and you know what? We're done with, is there a reason for this looking like this or this functioning like this? It's like, no, that's what it looks like, and you'll accept it. You showed up for 25 plus comic book movies. You're okay with the fact that he wears a cape now, right? It's like, yeah, I'm okay with the guy wearing a cape. I've accepted that. I've learned that.
Yeah, I think that's a really funny thing, which is we grew up through the era of black leather when they were so afraid of color. And then even the MCU, it was still kind of this hued gray, not sepia toned, but everything was muted. And then to get to this, and it's the only comparison I'm going to make because I liked Superman and I liked Fantastic Four, if you can't tell already. But these movies are unapologetically colorful comic book movies. And it feels like in that realm where it's a celebration, we're not embarrassed. I'm really glad it feels like we've turned that corner.
Yeah, and I think that's the best way to do this now, because audiences have learned to accept comic bookiness as an aesthetic. Lean into that. It's what people want by this point.
Look at, well, I mean, the other popcorn bucket behind me is the Wolverine mask. That took 24 years to get Hugh Jackman to wear a yellow costume and a Wolverine mask. And it was about time.
Well, the yellow costume I was waiting for. The mask, we can agree to disagree on how well that worked.
All right, so let's jump into spoilers. If you haven't seen Fantastic Four First Steps, I hope we'll hear you in the outro. Where are you going? It's only been 18 minutes. Regardless, we're going to jump into spoilers. You have been warned.
Could you take us through how you defeated Galactus? How we did?
We didn't.
Not yet. Not yet, we didn't. We attempted to negotiate, but Galactus... he asked too high a price.
All right, Fantastic Four First Steps obviously takes place on a parallel Earth. Where do you want to start with spoilers? I mean, Franklin was something in the initial teaser they hid from us, but then I think they realized he's in too much of the movie for us to hide it. So we have to embrace the expansion of the Fantastic Four First Family.
Well, I think also, I guess it's part of the fact that they've already been the Fantastic Four for 4 years, is the fact that we're sort of just willing to very much lean forward into things because we're not getting an origin, which again is okay because it's not, they're one of the first comic book, I think they are the first comic book superhero group, and their origin is very basic. You know what I mean? Space, cosmic
They're
rays.
Marvel's first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we get a very quick, again, montage of that happening. You know, I feel like montages are
The framework for that is something I liked because as opposed to opening with it, getting it to be a part of a celebration. Again, this is what's so funny to me about the way that the MCU has shown the public embraces superheroism, which is in this Earth, because they are heroes, and it's I would say, a more optimistic society.
Yes.
They are being celebrated, and through the veil of a TV celebration, almost like a jubilee or something, we see a smash cut of the montage, which, if you're unaware of what's going on, here's the information so we can move on with the main story.
I feel like, and I'm sure the aesthetic is leaning into this. It reminded me very much of, they do these ABC presentations, and I feel like it's sort of supposed to be their version of the Beatles being on Ed Sullivan. It feels like is the way that they have them appear in this ABC presentation show a couple times.
Yeah,
I think the thing that was the biggest deal to me was, how will Galactus be? Because it's a very tough villain to do, because he doesn't really have any personal relationship. He doesn't really have, his motivation is just me hungry. You know what I mean? Like, that's all Galactus feels like. The guy really just needs a huge sandwich. So,
been there.
well, who hasn't? Did you like Galactus specifically? Or were you like, he was good enough, or just better than
No,
Cloud?
Being better than a Cloud is obviously the bare minimum.
bar.
Again, but what's so funny is I've read a fair amount of Fantastic Four. I wouldn't say it's not one of the ones where I could show up to pub trivia and I know I would absolutely destroy it. I was working my way through the Jonathan Hickman stuff leading up to the film's release, but I haven't finished it yet. And that's more in the Council of Reeds stuff, which is like very much sci-fi, which is something I love. And before we get into that, because I think this is sort of connected to this, I absolutely love, and I'd be very curious if they would have done this if he was still with us. But this movie is a celebration of Jack King Kirby and what his impact was with the Marvel Comics universe. He gets a cameo in a little comic book shop. I don't know if you caught that.
I did not.
There's an actor who is clearly playing Jack Kirby, and one of the creators of the original creator of Captain America, as well as countless things, including the Fantastic Four. And Galactus as an entity, it's so funny because my impression of him was never planet. I mean, he can destroy a planet, but well-equipped, monologue-driven villains, which is, he is a natural disaster. And you need him to be compelling, where you don't like him and you're afraid for the Fantastic Four. So when you cast an actor who has a booming voice, and I always mispronounce it, so I'm going to have to pull it up. Apologies.
I believe it's Ralph Ineson.
Yes, I always want to say Ineson, but I don't believe that's correct. Regardless, you get that booming voice from a character. Somebody who feels eternal like a god is really important when selling that character. It can't be somebody who feels diminutive and doesn't have that gravitas to be afraid of. He's like, I guess he is one of one, but it's funny because we've had other not Eternals. No, I wanted to say quintessons, and that's not even the word either.
Celestials?
Thank you, Celestials. Yes. We've had Celestials in Eternals, and they went for a much more like rhinestone aesthetic, where this is a big dude in this mechanized machine. You know what the biggest thing that I saw draw from outside of, and Matt Shackman has talked about this, where it was the 60s aesthetic mixed with like futurism and then stuff from 2001 Space Odyssey. The way we see him in his big ship inside the planet, which I thought was a great callback to Celestials being inside of planets. It felt very Ultron from Transformers the movie, seeing the mechanisms, how they worked, his feeding tubes into his back, that being an observation that I almost said Bruce, that Reed makes that we see in the finale. And this person who has, well, you joked about it, but he is suffering from this eternal hunger, and his drive being, Franklin is a god, unbeknownst to his parents. This will solve my problem. So it's like, as opposed to, and this has been a fair criticism, a lot of MCU movies they're after the MacGuffin. In this instance, it's just the villain is after the MacGuffin. In this case, it's a human being. And the Fantastic Four are like, no, you can't have our MacGuffin, baby. which I thought worked. Like, he doesn't need speeches where you're like, I buy this guy, this is incredible. I want him to be terrifying because of his size and what he's going to do.
I think you understand him as a presence, and I think the tough thing about him and the Silver Surfer, which I believe was Shalabal is the name in this one,
Yep.
is the fact that they are both pretty stoic, and we get more Silver Surfer talking, but I think maybe I would have liked a little bit more. Is Galactus a Celestial?
I believe in context of the comics, he's normally a Celestial.
Okay,
Now,
I was
let
going
me
to say it's definitely a
confirm that.
different appearance between them, but I don't care
Different,
about that. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, it is a different universe. Let's see. Galactus, you a Celestial, baby? Alter ego. No, he is a Ta'an.
he's several tons.
He is a Ta'an. Existed in the universe prior to the setting of the Marvel continuity.
Okay,
I mean,
which they do
whatever.
say that
It's
he
all,
predates the universe and all that. Which I
yeah.
don't really care. It was only once you started bringing up the Celestials that I was like, is he one? But the other thing that I found myself thinking about with Galactus was there's a line he says at one point when he's like, I was once small like you or something like that. And I'm like, did he become this somehow? Like, it was just that allusion to it that made me think, is each one of these guys become this and then they try and pawn it off on somebody else? Like, I'll make Franklin the next one. Then I can just, go have pancakes and be satisfied for a while.
We get a flashback and he's just like, it's like a Muppet baby Galactus.
Yeah,
Just,
I would love to see the Tiny Toons version of Galactus. Yeah.
that would be fun.
Still, though, I liked Galactus just as a presence. He's not so much a character as he is, like you said, a natural disaster. That it's like he's going to come and wipe things out and we have to stop it, which is fine. I think that is Galactus, how he normally works. If you're looking for an actual character that the Fantastic Four fights, you're more likely to find that in Doctor Doom or, hell, even a Mole Man. You know what I mean?
I love the Mole Man appearances in this so much. You cast the perfect actor for that. He shows up and he just chews the scenery, and that's exactly what you need from Mole Man.
I feel a little bad for Paul Walter Hauser that the moment they said he was casting Fantastic Four, everyone was like, oh, Mole Man. Like, poor Paul Walter Hauser. He's like, maybe I'm Johnny. Like, you don't know. Like, give me a week where you speculate. They were like, oh, he's Mole Man.
Paul Walter Hauser is living his best life. If you look at the franchises that this guy's been able to hop in and out of, just last year he was in Cobra Kai and Inside Out 2. So I think he's doing it. And now he's in Fantastic Four.
He works. The man works, and he does well.
And he'll be in Naked Gun. Like, this guy's
about that.
Yeah.
Ooh. I will say, like I said, it's it feels weird that I keep going back to Jurassic World Rebirth, but it's very similar in the sense of this feels like in my head Jurassic World Rebirth mixed with Superman in the sense of it's overstuffed and everything works, but I'm missing something. Do you feel like you're missing a little something?
No, I don't. I find it really interesting. So here's where I'll disagree on you on the overstuffing. Jurassic World Rebirth is not overstuffed.
That's not overstuffed.
It's
That's
just
the one where everything works except one thing.
Okay, but Jurassic World Rebirth, the biggest problem is, for one, it's called Rebirth, and it is Jurassic World 4-time reheated leftovers, and that's how that movie feels. And I don't want to spend any time talking about it because every scene that movie does outside of one scene, which ironically is from the original novel, which is the Tyrannosaurus Rex with the boat in the river.
Mm-hmm.
That's from the original book that they just couldn't have done in 1993. Is that everything is derivative of stuff they've done already. Like, look, Scary Rex, look, raptors, except they have wing. Anyway, and none of those characters, one, I could not name them at all. None of them have names.
Oh, by this point, I can't remember any of their names, but
exactly.
I was referring to like our main guy who's like, oh yeah, Professor Science guy. Like, yeah.
But the difference is there's a frame. I think the framework for the overstuffing might feel, and I think this is a fair expectation where we are getting an entirely new world. Like, there's no way, based on however they decided they were going to do this, they were either, I mean, my theory that I had was, well, they'll be from the 60s and they were trapped outside of the universe for 65 years. And I'm glad they didn't go with that because the dynamic they're going to have in Doomsday is something I'm very much looking forward to, because one thing, and I don't see a lot of people talking about it, which I find kind of interesting, which is there were multiple times in this movie where I went, oh man, they're leading us into a very classic cliche that we'd seen quite literally in other Fantastic Four movies. And they went, no, we're not doing that. These are 4 grown adults. We're not like, they're going to rib each other because they're a very, very tight knit family, like quite literally. Like a great example of that would be, and I like that we have back and forth with Sue and Reed, where yes, they have disagreements, and Sue quite literally says, and as she would be going through like first time mom, dealing with the consequences of her husband thinking about the possibility that, and this is ultimately something we haven't actually said yet, so I'll just say it now, that Galactus wants Franklin, so he no longer has to be a whatever. Hungy. And that being one of the things that puts the Earth not against, but upset with the Fantastic Four. It's one of the great lines from, I heard it from in Star Trek, which is like one life, and it was also in in one of the Avengers movies. I believe it was Age of Ultron, like one life for the equals, I'm misquoting it. I'm very tired, but it's essentially one person is not worth the sacrifice for the many. There's a more eloquent way that this saying was said, and the movie focusing on this and having the conversations where when Sue realizes that Reed has come to this decision and is only looking at it completely objectively on how the world, I mean, New York specifically, is reacting to what their choice was. They have the conversation. Sue says, I'm upset with you because of some of these ideas you come up with because of how they make me feel. And I remember I leaned back in my chair and went, do not give me 20 minutes of they're like mad at each other. It's like, no, she's a grown adult. She told him how she felt. She's clearly, she got it off her chest, and it's not going to be the me back and forth. She goes out, she introduces Franklin to the people, reiterates the significance of the choice they make and the understanding about that. And the family's going to work together. And it gives us a great opportunity where, again, the Ben and Johnny element to this works so well, the back and forth. Like the scene of them sitting in, it's got to be Ben's room.
I believe it is, when they're saying who will go and check if they're back first.
Yeah. Yeah, he's like, go get him. He's like, oh man, I'm so happy. Thank you so much for going to get him. He's like, you know what? I'm so happy you went to go get him. And they're like, just back and forth. And then Sue shows up and you see immediately the relation, like the history with them is felt in the way that they converse with each other, the way that they make fun of each other. And that is a testament to this being essentially a one-off, quite frankly, because they're going to be included in other stuff, and Fantastic Four 2 will be in a whole different universe. But Reed coming to the realization and everybody understanding the shared goal of what they have to do isn't melodrama, which in some other movies, even in the MCU, could be 20 minutes of derailment, right? Sue disappears quite literally, and they're like, well, what are we going to do? And then she comes to the realization that we need to use Franklin as bait. In a worse movie, that's what would have happened. And quite frankly, and I'll make some criticism here, in the Tim Story Fantastic Four movies, that's all they let Jessica Alba do, was the complainer. In this movie, Vanessa is allowed to be, not allowed, but is given the opportunity to be an equal member of the Fantastic Four and the standout. And for me, this is a perfect pivot point to where the Marvel universe in the comics has such incredible women through Jean Grey's situations, specifically in the MCU with Wanda, who's had some great moments, thinking back to the Endgame moment, or Infinity War, when she has to kill the man she loved, and then she throws down Thanos, and he doesn't even remember her, which is a great moment. And then getting Vanessa Kirby ultimately being the one who saves the day. Like the power of the love she has for her son and her family and the planet she lives on. Like seeing her go essentially, I'm going to call it Phoenix mode on Galactus, seeing it twice, both times I absolutely adored it.
Well, I think to give a comment about comparing this to the previous Fantastic Four movies, I feel like this time and maybe it's, not to compare Jessica Alba and Vanessa Kirby as actors. Vanessa Kirby does a much better job of, I have to pretend that I'm creating a force field right now. You know what I mean? She does a great job of it. She makes it look well. And this movie seemed very comfortable in relying on, we feel comfortable with our Sue Storm effect. You know what I mean? And I think it looks great. I think it works well. The one I feel like they were worried about, and that they were worried, I think if they overused it, that they were worried about what would happen, was Reed. Reed doesn't use his stretchy powers that often, I felt like. There would be times where he's standing at a big chalkboard, and I'm like, so he's going to stretch from side to side to right on this chalkboard, right? And like, I see him walking, and I'm like, why is he walking? Maybe it's just the really lazy me. I would never walk anywhere with giant stretchy powers. I'd be in bed all day because I can reach the fridge. I don't need to get up. Like, the fact that he is walking to the other side of a chalkboard, I was like, nuh-uh, no, he ain't. Mm-mm.
I get it. It's an interesting thing because it feels like in some regard they've been afraid to do that. In general, Miss Marvel famously didn't get stretchy powers.
Mhm.
She was given other things to do.
Green Lantern.
Yeah, she did. She
Yeah.
got construct. She got Green Lantern abilities, which is super funny. I don't, you know what? One of the things that I really appreciated from the stretchiness of his powers in this instance was they made it feel much more, pun intended, I guess, elastic. And what I mean by that is it felt firm. It didn't feel as if he had no structure in the elasticity. When he snaps to something, he can immediately be pulled back to it. It wasn't like cooked pasta extension,
Yeah.
which sometimes it has looked like. And it's funny because the Fantastic Four, in at least in the versions that I've read, they're not overwhelmingly using their powers a ton. It's like efficiency of that. I totally understand. Like there definitely was, and maybe it was cut, where Reed's arm is just stretching over and over and over and over and over again to write. We get a short version of that.
Mhm.
But yeah, it is one of those effects that they're clearly a little afraid of,
Which is fair.
which is fine.
Yeah, it's fair because it's the one that's the most, we know what the human body should look like. So to see the human body do something so ridiculous, it's so easy to break that suspension of disbelief and say, oh, that looks bad because I don't believe a person can do that anymore. Which
Yeah,
obviously a
for the-
person can't.
Well, and then we get the best tense moment with it, pun intended, which is Galactus getting a hold of Reed and just pulling him apart.
Yeah.
Or attempting to pull him apart. And I went, well, they can't do this, but how far are we going to go?
It went pretty far. Like his suit
went-
starts to rip. I was like, oh God, no.
And people have been critical of this. And I actually think in terms of embracing silly is not the right word, but the fun of this universe. I like a human being as much as I love the wackiness of a lot of comic book worlds. They're not going to be using their catchphrases all the time. They're just not. There might be something people are familiar with you saying, but you're not going to be using it all the time. And getting a moment similar to, it was 19 movie buildup for Avengers Assemble, having its clobbering time be this thing that's kind of hanging over Ben, and the buildup to be that moment when he's working with Johnny to save Reed. It's a great moment. It's one of those cheering moments where it's something everybody knows the thing says. And what's funny though, Johnny never actually says flame on. The little toy does from the cereal box,
Yep.
but he never does.
Yeah, well, I think it's clobbering time is a bigger catchphrase than flame on is, but I was surprised we didn't get that. Not that I was, distraught over it, but I really like the way they did set it up as in, obviously there was a cartoon based on the Fantastic Four, and that's where its clobbering time comes from. And the whole time he's just like, it's not a thing that I ever say. It's not a thing that I ever did say. And the only reason he does say it is because it's Johnny Carrion going, come on, say the line. Like, it's very much the meme, say the line, Bart. You know what I mean? And he's like, it's clobbering time.
But it's said with earnest.
Yes.
It's not it's an F yeah moment, which I loved. And you know what I appreciate too is they all have such unique powers, and getting to see them use them effectively. One of the moments that I just feels like, oh, they've done this a bunch. Maybe not specifically this, was seeing Ben Grimm throw the truck full of gasoline at Galactus, and Johnny immediately being like, "Oh, I got it. Let's light this guy on fire."
Yeah.
Where they're trying to problem solve together. And I mentioned this already when Reed is trying to slow Galactus down from kidnapping Franklin, and he uses a pipe to open up one of his ports on the back, or I guess his feeding tube spots, and immediately like, oh no, like yesterday's breakfast just fell out.
Which I guess makes sense because it's not like his jaw unhinges like a snake for him to swallow planets whole.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I was fine with. Yeah, I thought at first I was trying to understand. I was like, wait, what did he just do to him? But it does make total sense. I think it's honestly the only moment that somebody really does hurt him, I felt like.
I don't know. The severity to which they scald his eyes didn't seem to be that severe.
It seemed more of a
But again,
nuisance,
like,
yeah.
but it's a great combination of their abilities. Like the funny version in the first Fantastic Four was they're like, let's do this together. Johnny go supernova. There's no nose bleeding when Sue's using her powers. But we have Sue create essentially like a magnifying glass for Johnny's flames to blind him so they can do the switch.
Mm-hmm.
And what's so funny to me about that is it's such like a juvenile trick. Like, haha, we're going to switch the car seats and he'll never know.
I do feel like for one of the smartest characters in all comic books, it was like, this was the best we got, because he clocks it pretty much instantly. He's like, wait a second. And they do a good job of showing Galactus have basically supervision, where he can just look around and be like, there's nothing in there. Like, he'd be the worst to be sitting at a magician's act. He would just be like, I can see you're hiding another card under that glass. You know what I mean? That type of thing.
It could have been really funny to have like Herbie in the in the car seat instead. That would have been super funny. I was a little disappointed. I felt like when Galactus attacks the Baxter building, that Herbie would have like a Gundam mode.
I didn't, honestly. I thought Herbie was going to be in his hand as well when he did bring his hand up, and I thought like we were going to see Herbie die. I don't know if Herbie died or not there. Not that I have enough attachment to Herbie that I would be distraught if he did. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Herbie looked to me like a genderless version of the robot from the Jetsons. Like, he's not in the French maid outfit, but there's a lot of aesthetics that are certainly similar.
He's definitely got a little bit of a Wall-E thing to him too.
Mm-hmm. Like, obviously Herbie is from the comics. I know. But yeah, I think it's really interesting. So do you have any major things you want to talk about that we haven't addressed yet in spoilers?
It's not a major thing, but one of my favorite uses of showing any of the four of their powers is the moment where Reed and Sue are together, and Sue uses her powers to make just her skin invisible so that Reed can directly see Franklin inside of the womb still. I was like, that's cool.
I absolutely, and to me, what I love so much about their powers and the way they use them is those intimate moments like that. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because one of the most beautiful scenes I've seen in the MCU probably ever, the birthing of Franklin as they are fleeing Galactus, and where she's delivering a baby. I have been present for this twice. And to see what she's being put through, not to mention the exterior stress of Galactus and the Silver Surfer trying to kidnap Franklin, unnamed at this point, and where she disappears and Reed knows exactly where she is. Like, that to me shows how much they're in sync, where he just puts his hand out, and when she reappears, her hand is there and the baby is born. And you just see, like, this is a true family. They're not people who just happen to be in the same circumstances together. Like, I don't know why anybody was friends with Chris Evans as Johnny outside of him being Jessica Alba's brother. Like, I honestly don't. And Johnny in this is a relatively smart dude. He Rosetta Stones Silver Surfer's language in order to like get through to her, which I appreciate.
They make him smart enough that he like can complete a task on his own, which was a task that I felt like in those earlier movies would be something else that Reed also does. And instead they were like, no, Johnny's not going to be an idiot. Like, obviously he's still a little, he's got a little bit of cockiness to him. He's, they make him out to be also like, well, instead of making him a ladies' man, they're just like, eternally single Johnny Storm. Like, I don't know if that's better or worse that Johnny's kind of into the Silver Surfer. It's not such a running bit that it becomes ridiculous in any way. They make one or two references to him thinking that she's sexy, which each time I never jived up against. I kind of, found funny and I was amused by. The Silver Surfer, they made really cool in the sense of is able to go light speed, is able to go through things. Like I was like, oh, the Silver Surfer is a bad mother. You know what I mean?
And she actually surfs. The two sequences we see her actually surfing
Around the black
on
hole.
lava. Oh, and the black hole. All
Mhm.
those sequences are like, it's the Silver Surfer. Like, yes, she's flying through space, but like she quite literally goes through a tunnel of debris within the Galactus spaceship, which was super cool. And getting the moments, I would say one of my main criticisms is, and this is just kind of a caveat of them having to tell us so much, is in that sequence when Johnny tells her, like, I know who you are, he then just has to tell the audience, and it's
Yes.
just straight exposition.
Absolutely. That whole scene is just exposition. And then the Silver Surfer is like, I gotta go. Like she just leaves, which
Why did you trauma bond me with my trauma?
it kind of reminded me of, I don't know if you watch It's Always Sunny, the scene where Frank is in therapy and he's just like, you've unzipped me. I don't like how it feels. I don't like it. Like, that's kind of how she was. And she just got out of there. The only other thing I noticed too is they make a big deal of the FTL, which is their faster than light thing to get to Galactus that their ship boards into and then moves with it. And then at some point, they sacrifice the FTL when they're near the black hole, and they still can go light speed without it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. Again, did that ruin the movie for me? By no means. I also feel like I want to go back and change something I said. I wouldn't call the movie overstuffed. I would call the movie over edited, because it feels like there was probably, 2 hours and 20 minutes worth of movie, but they gave me an hour 55. Does that feel more fair to say?
I think that is a more apt description. Sure. Definitely. Yeah.
You. Like,
all right.
They make several allusions to the character that John Malkovich was supposed to play.
Yep.
In montages and in the cartoon, that I'm like, so here's where he would have been. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I can tell that there might have been an opening action sequence where we would have seen him and them fight type of thing. Which is fine with me, because we could save John Malkovich for a better role. You know what I mean?
That's true. Yeah. So he's not in this canonically. Okay. So it's been a really interesting year for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We've had 3 films and we've had a TV series, and we're not going to discuss Daredevil because it's rating a television series with a film. I feel those are unfair challenges for both because they're very different mediums. So I have here, let's rank the Marvel Cinematic Universe in 2025. So we have 3 films. We have, in release order, they were Captain America: Brave New World. We have Thunderbolts: The New Avengers, which I feel like is fair to say now. And then we had The Fantastic Four: The First Steps. So Dylan, starting at 3, 2, and 1, how would you rank the Marvel films in 2025 in terms of favorites?
Okay, starting with the worst one, or my least favorite.
Your least favorite, yes.
Well, my least favorite by a lot is Captain America: Brave New World. I don't think that's shocking to say. Whoa, hot take. 2 and 1 are much closer on the podium. I would put Thunderbolts at 2. And I would put Fantastic Four: First Steps at 1. I really liked these characters together enough that I'm saying I wish I had more of them. You know what I mean? The Thunderbolts, I felt like I knew a lot of those characters more already, and I still wish I could have gotten better interlock between them. But also, I don't know. I think I'm the one person who didn't jive well enough with hugs saved the day type of thing. Maybe that's just me. We're not here to talk about Thunderbolts. Fantastic Four: First Steps, I really liked, so I would put that above Thunderbolts, just barely.
My ranking would be exactly the same as yours, more so than anything, because they introduced characters that I absolutely adore and managed to absolutely nail how I feel the essence of those characters has been not sorely unutilized in different interpretations. The scene, to kind of wrap this up, to me really sold this family was when Sue dies, forcing Galactus into the black hole. Johnny willing to sacrifice himself in order to save Franklin, not having to do so because the Silver Surfer shows up, and seeing Reed's loss. Like, yes, I've just saved my newborn son, but I've lost the woman I love. and then Franklin going God mode, being like, "No, you are needed for a further story, mother."
It was crazy that he
And
said that too.
was insane. Sounded just like Keith David. It was very, very weird. So I
He was the perfect choice for Franklin Richards as a baby, though.
as he would be.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about all the Latveria references where we constantly see an empty chair and then the post-credit scene. So I don't want to not talk about this. How did you feel just getting the back of Doctor Doom in the robe for the significant post-credit scene?
I think I was absolutely fine with that as just a tease of like Doctor Doom is coming. The other thing I feel like that we didn't talk about is how this kind of I feel like makes the Thunderbolts post-credit scene not matter, because I don't get how we're getting that now.
But see, I think this is what's really interesting to me is the ones that led up to Infinity War felt like part of the story that aren't in those movies, which the Russo brothers have kind of said, which is those scenes aren't in the movies. They're just material to lead you into the next thing, which is with all the different time jumps. My thought is Franklin is abducted by Doom either on screen or off screen. So it could be the Fantastic Four are in the ship in Thunderbolts, because that is a different ship than the Excelsior. It's 4-pronged instead of 3. And so could that be Doom kidnapping Franklin, or it's the Fantastic Four? So like, I think there's options where that's a part of the story, because for me, at least, there's no reason why the Fantastic Four are traveling dimensions.
Yeah.
Why else would they be it has to be Franklin's abduction.
I will say, I think that post-credit scene did do a good job of sort of misdirecting us into this movie believing, well, they're going to fail, right? Galactus is going to destroy their world.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Which the Robot Chicken version of this movie shows a scene afterwards of Galactus and Silver Surfer just in the void of space, just being like, I hate you.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
All right, so we're done with Avengers Doomsday speculation. So yeah, that will wrap up our Fantastic Four and the First Steps review. We're going to jump into question of the week responses and listener mail.
Can I ask you a question? Just one?
There's something I've been meaning to ask you.
I ask the questions, you answer the questions.
Why do you ask questions to which you already know the answers?
Did that count as a question?
Yes.
Damn it.
Last week's question of the week was, what was the iteration of the Fantastic Four you were introduced to? I worded this better in the final video, which was, what iteration introduced you to the Fantastic Four? That's what it was. So Dylan, you're here with us. So why don't you just say what your answer was so I don't have to read it?
Oh God, I hope it matches what my actual answer was, because the first thing that comes to my memory is the cartoon, and it's not really the cartoon though. It's really the Secret Wars, where they were part of Spider-Man, the animated series, the greatest version of Spider-Man that's ever been animated.
So do you want me to read what you said? It says, first iteration of the Fantastic Four for me is probably from the drastically underrated Spider-Man, the animated series, and the 2000s movies, and The Incredibles 2, if that counts.
Yes, Spider-Man, drastically underrated. Spider-Man, the animated series.
Yeah. Spider-Man underrated. Yeah, I don't know if that's a possible thing. Scotty, I would love to read this entire novel, and I probably will, so let's go. All right, buckle in, Dylan. Here we go. Scotty Cameron, since this came up in the episode, I would like to address what Vertigo is. So Vertigo... Oh, Scotty, I know what this is. Oh,
the comic brand or the disease?
The comic brand. I'm not reading it, Scotty. I'm sorry, buddy. I love you. I read it with my eyes, but I'm not going to read it here. I will, however, Scotty, read your answer to the question of the week was, it's the mid-2000s live-action movies with Chris Evans. Those came out at the right time when my criteria for a good movie was explosions and a happy ending. So sometimes those are the same thing.
What movie theater was Scotty going to getting these happy endings?
So I didn't realize how bad those movies were until I got older, sort of like the Star Wars prequels and the Bayformers. Still better than Fan Four Stick. Yeah, no argument here. I will give a special shout out to Fantastic Four, World's Greatest Heroes. I loved that cartoon because it was a good cartoon that did the heavy lifting for the Fantastic Four's franchise after failing. That's true. I think that's a cartoon that's been dramatically underappreciated. This week's question of the week is a very apt one, I feel like, for you, Dylan, which is, which comedy would you actually like to see get remade. So Dylan, you hold on to your answer. You can save it for next week.
Oh, thank
The
God.
reason that is the question of the week is because next week's episode of the podcast is going to be a review of the Naked Gun remake / reboot / sequel. So if you'd like to answer the question of the week, you can email the podcast, filmreelistspod@gmail.com. You can at the Film Realist on any of the social medias, or you can comment directly within Spotify and YouTube. I look forward to your answers, and you can hear me react to them on next week's episode. You can hear Dylan Pollack and his cousin Gab on Movies to Watch Before You Die every other week on all your podcast platforms. Dylan, do you want to tease what the next thing is, or are you not going to tell us?
Actually, the next thing coming out after this, and I still think 2 Fridays from now will be, we're going to do actually a couple of recent movies. So we got Superman coming out, then we're going to do The Naked Gun as well, and I think then we're going to do Freakier Friday.
There you go. Wow. You guys are barking on my territory. I don't like it.
Yeah, we're coming to get you. I'm doing the snaps from West Side Story.
Perfect. As long as I'm the Jets. Actually, wait, I don't know if I want that. Maybe I'll be the Sharks. I'll be the Sharks.
You're a Jet all the way, and you know it.
It's true. I am a Jet. Thank you so much to everybody for listening to the podcast. If you haven't yet, please leave a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice and make sure to drop a follow. Lastly, small request. If you haven't yet, subscribe to the Film Realist YouTube channel. That's the best place to see all of the trailer reactions, all the shorts I make, as well as a video form of the podcast with some lovely art made by yours truly. My name is Kyle Naranya, and I will see you next time. Okay, don't